Walk Elvis Presley's Memphis without seeing Sun Studio. It was the first to record Elvis and many other musical greats.
For over 7 decades, the walls of Sun Record Studio in Memphis have echoed with the spirits of legends: Elvis Presley, Johnny Cash, Jerry Lee Lewis, and Carl Perkins. But just 1 minute ago, everything we thought we knew about the birthplace of rock and roll changed forever. During an unplanned restoration under the original studio floor, workers stumbled upon a sealed chamber that hadn't seen light since the 1950s. The men described the air as heavy, cold, and filled with a strange metallic scent. Inside that chamber was something no one expected: a buried container locked away beneath layers of concrete and mystery. The discovery instantly halted all work as law enforcement and federal agents surrounded the site. Local reports describe men in unmarked vehicles, and whispers already suggest this find could hold the missing key to one of rock's greatest unsolved mysteries: the truth about what Sam Phillips hid before his death. What they uncovered beneath that studio could change music history forever. Before we dive into what was found beneath the floor, it's important to remember what Sun Records truly was: a place where music's rawest dreams came alive. When Sam Phillips opened the tiny recording studio at 706 Union Avenue in 1950, he had no money, no fame, and no guarantee that anyone would even walk through the door. Yet, within those walls, he captured lightning in a bottle. Elvis Presley walked in one hot July day in 1953 to record a song for his mother. Phillips heard something in his voice, something wild, untamed, and utterly new. A year later, Elvis returned, joined by Johnny Cash, Jerry Lee Lewis, and Carl Perkins. Together, they would become known as the $1 Million Quartet, forever altering the sound of American music. But behind the laughter, the fame, and the flashing lights, there were rumors, strange ones. Employees whispered that Phillips sometimes stayed late into the night, locking himself in the back room with recording equipment that no one else was allowed to touch. Some said he was chasing the perfect sound. Others said he was hiding it. Over time, visitors reported seeing sealed boxes and metal canisters stacked under the floorboards of the studio's isolation booth. Phillips would just smile and say, "Some things are meant for another time." Even after his death in 2003, family members mentioned how he spoke of unfinished work and a message for the future. Many dismissed it as poetic talk from a man obsessed with his craft, but today, that obsession might have been more literal than anyone realized. For decades, tourists have passed through the studio, standing on the same worn tiles where Elvis recorded "That's All Right," completely unaware that beneath their feet, something extraordinary waited in silence. The world knew Sun Records as the birthplace of rock and roll, but maybe, just maybe, it was also its burial ground, keeping the greatest secret in music history locked away beneath its very foundation. It started as a simple preservation project, nothing more than structural reinforcement to keep the aging Sun Records building from collapsing under its own history. The floor had begun to sink in places, and engineers were brought in to stabilize the foundation. But when workers lowered a ground-penetrating radar scanner into the main recording room, they noticed something strange. Beneath the old concrete slab was a void, an irregular, box-shaped cavity, about 6 feet wide and 4 feet deep. At first, they thought it was an old storage pit or a leftover from the original construction. But when the drill hit metal instead of dirt, everything changed. The moment word reached the site manager, work stopped immediately. Soon, police cars lined Union Avenue, and the studio was closed to the public. Witnesses said men in plain suits arrived within the hour, carrying sealed black cases and speaking quietly to the crew. Local news reporters were turned away, told the studio was undergoing emergency maintenance, but those close to the dig leaked photos. Grainy images showing a steel container covered in a thick layer of dust, stamped with the initials SP. Workers described the moment they broke through the final layer of cement. A rush of stale air escaped, like something exhaling after decades underground. The inside walls were lined with insulation and sealed with an early form of vapor protection, way too advanced for a 1950s recording studio. That's when everyone realized this wasn't accidental. Someone had intentionally built this chamber to last. One worker later claimed he found a small brass plaque near the base of the pit, reading only, "For the sound that never dies." When authorities opened the lid of the container, what they saw inside left them speechless. The contents weren't junk, weren't garbage, they were artifacts, untouched and preserved. But before anyone could speak, federal agents took control of the site and ordered everyone out. Within hours, the building was surrounded by unmarked vehicles, and the entire area was cordoned off. From that moment on, the excavation beneath Sun Records was no longer a renovation, it was an investigation. When the container was finally lifted out from beneath the studio floor, it was clear that this wasn't some forgotten storage box, it was a vault. The steel casing was double-sealed with lead lining and locked with bolts that hadn't been touched in over 70 years. Inside, investigators found a collection of items so peculiar and historically charged that experts still can't fully comprehend their significance. Dozens of reel-to-reel tapes, each meticulously labeled with sets of initials that sent chills down every spine in the room. EP, JC, JLL, and CP, the unmistakable marks of Elvis Presley, Johnny Cash, Jerry Lee Lewis, and Carl Perkins. Each reel was wrapped in a wax-like material, preserved perfectly against time, and accompanied by yellowing notes in the unmistakable handwriting of Sam Phillips himself. But what truly baffled everyone was the ledger, a thick, leather-bound notebook filled with coded messages, recording times, and mysterious session names that no one had ever heard of. One page in particular listed a date, July 4th, 1954, next to the words, "Private Take, Session X, Never Release." If that date is accurate, it means Phillips may have recorded something monumental the very same week Elvis cut his first single. Among the papers were sketches of experimental microphones and recording devices unlike anything known from that era. Designs that seemed decades ahead of their time. But then, there was something even stranger. At the bottom of the container sat a smaller lead box, separate from the rest, completely unmarked. Its surface was sealed tight and bore faint traces of Phillips's initials scratched by hand, as though done in haste. Some witnesses claim they saw the letters "Do Not Open" faintly etched beneath the metal sheen. Whatever was inside, it was important enough to be buried in the most secure way possible. Rumors quickly began spreading that this smaller box held something more personal, a message, a confession, or even a recording Phillips never wanted the public to hear. No one could confirm anything, as officials quickly confiscated the contents, locking them away for analysis. But the whispers grew louder by the hour, and those who glimpsed what lay inside said it wasn't just history, it was a revelation that could rewrite the story of rock and roll itself. The smaller lead box immediately became the center of speculation and secrecy. Workers described it as oddly heavy for its size, almost as if it contained something dense and precious. When investigators attempted to move it, one of them reportedly said it felt alive, as if something inside vibrated faintly. No one could explain the strange low hum that seemed to resonate when light hit the metal. The box was sealed with 3 bolts and wrapped in a deteriorating cloth, marked with the initials SP, Sam Phillips's unmistakable signature. Why would the founder of Sun Records go through the trouble of creating such a container and burying it beneath his own studio? To many, the answer lies in Phillips's lifelong obsession with sound. He once said, "If I could trap a feeling, I'd bury it until the world was ready." Maybe this was what he meant. Some historians believe the box could contain lost recordings, sessions he considered too raw, too personal, or too controversial for release. Others suspect it could hold letters or confessions about his relationships with artists he discovered. But there's another theory, one far more haunting. In the years before his death, Phillips had grown distant from the music industry, often speaking cryptically about protecting the legacy from vultures. Friends recalled him saying he had buried the truth where greed couldn't find it. Those who worked with him remember one night in the 1970s when he ordered everyone out of the studio and stayed locked inside until dawn. When he emerged, he looked shaken, as if he'd just sealed something away forever. Decades later, that same section of the floor was exactly where the lead box was found. According to an anonymous insider who claims to have seen inside the FBI's initial report, the box wasn't just filled with tapes. There was a small envelope, addressed simply to the ones who still believe. Inside, there was a single phrase scrawled in Phillips's handwriting: "The first sound still lives." The note was so vague yet so powerful that it sent shivers through everyone who read it. Some now wonder if Phillips recorded something beyond ordinary sound, something experimental, possibly supernatural, that he couldn't explain. Rumors online exploded, with theories ranging from lost Elvis vocals to a hidden frequency Phillips discovered that he believed could alter emotion. Whatever it was, the government quickly stepped in. The box was taken into custody, and every trace of its contents vanished from public record. But for those who know the legend of Sam Phillips, one truth remains: he was never a man who did anything by accident. If he buried this box, it was because he knew the world wasn't ready for what it held. By the morning after the discovery, the entire block around Sun Records was sealed off. Locals who tried to approach the building were turned away by police claiming it was a structural hazard. But witnesses saw something far different. Black SUVs, men in dark suits, and boxes being quietly loaded into government vehicles under heavy guard. According to a construction worker who spoke anonymously, agents from the FBI had arrived overnight, confiscating not only the lead box, but also the ledger and all the reel-to-reel tapes found inside the buried vault. No one knew why the federal government would involve itself in what appeared to be a simple historical find, until someone leaked that the ledger contained coded references to private recordings, hidden accounts, and potential payoffs involving several major record companies. It wasn't just a music story anymore. It was a matter of national interest. Insiders claim that one entry in the ledger mentioned a transfer of materials in 1956, described only as classified U.S. property. What could Sam Phillips possibly have recorded that made the government step in? Some historians now believe Phillips may have recorded something during his early radio experiments in the 1940s, possibly a test using military-grade equipment later reused at Sun. He was known for modifying his own recording machines, often tinkering with frequencies far beyond normal range. The ledger included technical notes referencing signal capture 12.7 and resonance beneath the human threshold. To most, that means nothing, but to sound engineers, it suggests he was experimenting with infrasound, frequencies that can trigger unease, fear, or even hallucinations in listeners. The question now is, did Phillips accidentally record something he wasn't supposed to, or something no one could explain? As rumors grew, a second leak claimed that among the seized materials was a tape labeled Session X. Historians had heard whispers of this session for years, but it was always considered myth, a secret gathering of Elvis, Cash, Lewis, and Perkins after hours, where they recorded songs that never made it to vinyl. If true, it could be the single most valuable lost recording in American history. But the government's sudden involvement cast a darker shadow. Why seize music reels unless they contained something more than songs? Some believed the tapes captured conversations, private confessions, or even recordings of officials visiting Sun Records back in the 1950s. Others say the FBI wanted to prevent a cultural bombshell from shaking the foundations of music ownership, since the reels could reveal that early masters of Elvis and Cash were never properly transferred to RCA, meaning Sun, or Phillips's estate, might still own them. Whatever the case, every artifact taken that day vanished into silence. The FBI issued a brief statement calling the find a matter of archival review, but experts knew that phrase meant one thing: whatever they found under Sun Records would not be seeing daylight anytime soon. When news of the hidden vault beneath Sun Records began to leak through online forums and late-night radio shows, the world of music erupted in disbelief. Within hours, tributes and statements poured in from artists, historians, and even surviving relatives of the original Sun legend. The first to speak publicly was John Carter Cash, son of Johnny Cash, who demanded transparency from the authorities, saying whatever was found under that studio belongs to the people, not to the government. My father's voice is part of that foundation. His words ignited a storm. Jerry Lee Lewis's estate followed, calling the discovery a resurrection of rock's buried soul. Even Priscilla Presley broke her silence, sharing on social media that she was shaken but deeply moved, adding cryptically, "Elvis always said there were songs he recorded that no one was ready to hear." Fans around the world began gathering outside Sun Records, lighting candles and leaving guitars and notes that read, "Let the music speak." But behind the emotion was growing tension. Rumors spread that private collectors and corporate representatives from major record labels had already started making quiet offers for access to the tapes. Some feared that the true legacy of Sun Records, the authenticity, the rebellion, the raw power of its sound, was about to be buried once again, this time under legal battles and red tape. Music historians warned that if the government held those tapes too long, they might never be heard again. In Nashville, whispers began circulating that some former studio employees were planning to come forward with information they'd been keeping secret for decades. One technician, now in his late 80s, claimed he once saw Sam Phillips record something off the books late one night, using equipment that wasn't standard for the time. He described hearing a sound that wasn't natural, like a voice within a frequency. That confession only fueled more wild theories, from lost gospel experiments to secret meetings with military sound engineers. Meanwhile, fan protests outside the studio grew larger. They sang Elvis classics late into the night, their voices echoing through Union Avenue, as if trying to reach whatever still lingered beneath the studio floor. Journalists began calling it the Echo Protest, a symbolic gesture meant to awaken the buried spirit of rock and roll. One protester was quoted saying, "Sam built that studio to give voices to the forgotten. Now, those voices are being silenced again." Even modern artists joined in. Bruce Springsteen, Jack White, and Chris Isaak all expressed outrage, demanding that the contents be preserved, not hidden. By the week's end, conspiracy theories had taken over social media. Some claimed the recordings contained Elvis's unreleased gospel prophecies. Others said it was evidence of industry corruption. But through all the noise, one thing was clear: the world was not going to let Sun Records' secret fade quietly into government archives. The story had grown too big, too emotional, and too symbolic. For millions of fans, this was no longer just about lost tapes. It was about reclaiming the heartbeat of rock and roll itself. Late last night, under the cover of secrecy, a small group of preservation experts working in cooperation with audio historians reportedly gained limited access to the contents of the lead box that had been seized by authorities. What they found inside has sent shockwaves across the world of music history. Instead of a pile of documents or financial ledgers, as many suspected, the lead box contained a single acetate disc, sealed inside a velvet pouch with the faint smell of aging metal and oil. On the outer rim of the disc, barely visible under the dim lab lights, were hand-etched words that read, "For the Dreamers." The label bore no company markings, no date, no catalog number, only one faint signature, the unmistakable initials of Sam Phillips. Experts immediately recognized the disc's fragile surface as an original test pressing, the kind used only for private listening or experimentation. When audio technicians carefully placed the disc onto a restored turntable, they didn't expect much. But as the needle touched down, a faint crackle filled the room, then a voice. A haunting, young, unmistakable voice. It was Elvis Presley, clear as day, singing a song that no one in the world had ever heard before. The melody was simple, soft, almost ghostly, and the lyrics, if transcribed correctly, spoke of chasing light through darkness, never fading sound, and the day the music comes home. As the song played, a quiet shiver spread through the listeners. It wasn't the energy of early rock and roll, it was something deeper, almost spiritual. As if Elvis knew his music would transcend time itself. Behind him, another voice could be faintly heard, one identified as Sam Phillips, softly humming and speaking near the piano, guiding him through the take. Experts later confirmed that the acoustics didn't match any known Sun Records session. They were cleaner, purer, and recorded on technology that shouldn't have existed in the 1950s. Audio engineers noted an unexplained resonance, a subtle hum beneath the vocals that appeared to fluctuate at a near imperceptible frequency, something modern equipment struggles to replicate. Theories exploded immediately. Some claim it's proof of Phillips experimenting with frequencies meant to evoke emotion. Others say it's an artifact of an entirely unknown recording technique. What no one can deny is that the song, tentatively titled "The First Sound," is unlike anything ever recorded by Elvis or anyone from that era. Those who heard it described the experience as eerie yet beautiful, with one expert saying it felt like the room itself was breathing. By morning, the tape of the playback was taken by federal agents for further examination, and the acetate disc was sealed in an archival case. But the few who witnessed the event said something that continues to haunt them. When the song ended, the needle lifted itself from the record on its own, and for a moment, the room fell completely silent, except for a faint echo, as if the sound of that buried song was still drifting through the air, refusing to die. The discovery beneath Sun Records has become more than a historical event. It has become a moment of reckoning for the entire music world. What began as a simple restoration project has now evolved into a cultural awakening, one that challenges everything we thought we knew about the birth of rock and roll. For decades, Sun Records was seen as the starting line of modern music, but now it appears it was also the resting place of a message from Sam Phillips himself to those who would come after him. The acetate disc, the hidden tapes, the coded ledger, and the mysterious phrase, "for the dreamers," have taken on an almost prophetic meaning. Music historians now believe Phillips buried his greatest creation not for fame or profit, but to protect the purity of what he stood for. He was a man who believed that music could speak truth, that sound could carry emotion more honestly than any word ever could. By hiding that disc beneath his studio, he ensured that the legacy of the raw, unfiltered spirit of rock would remain untouched until the world was ready to listen again. And maybe, just maybe, that time has come. In the weeks following the discovery, memorials appeared across Memphis. Fans gathered outside the studio every night, singing Elvis songs, lighting candles, and whispering prayers for the preservation of what was found. The Dreamers, they called themselves, ordinary people who believed in the purity of sound, in the unending echo of music's soul. Universities and preservationists have demanded the immediate release of the recordings, arguing they belong to the world, not locked away in government archives. But the debate rages on. Some insist the contents could disrupt corporate ownership and cause massive legal chaos over music rights, while others argue it's not about law or business, it's about art, about the sound that never dies. As for the studio itself, strange occurrences have been reported since the discovery. Tourists claim they can still hear faint music playing beneath the floorboards late at night, as if the echoes of that buried song are still resonating through the wood and wires. One audio technician even swore he recorded a faint whisper while testing the mics after hours, a voice repeating the words, "We're still here." Whether it's imagination, interference, or something more, no one can say. But one thing is undeniable. The ground beneath Sun Records has spoken. The discovery has reignited the world's fascination with the golden age of music, with fans and musicians alike remembering that before the fame, before the money, there was just sound, pure, rebellious, eternal. Sam Phillips once said, "If I could find a white man who had the Negro sound and the Negro feel, I could make $1 billion. What he truly found was something greater, a sound that crossed boundaries, defied time, and refused to be forgotten. And now, decades later, his secret gift to the world has been unearthed. What lies beneath Sun Records is not just history, it's a heartbeat buried in silence, waiting 70 years to remind us that music, like truth, can never truly be buried.